It's 11:47 p.m. You're in bed, phone glowing in the dark, and the notification makes your stomach drop. Breaking missile strikes reported. You don't want to click it, but you do. And for the next 17 minutes, you're not sleeping, you're scrolling, reading, watching grainy footage of explosions lighting up night skies. And somewhere around minute 12, the fear you've been pushing down finally surfaces as a question you text to your pastor, then delete, then type again. Is this it? Is this how it starts? Your hands are shaking, not because you're weak, but because you're human. And you're a Christian, which means you're caught between two voices screaming in your head. One says, watch, the signs are everywhere. Ezekiel 38 is unfolding right now. The other says, don't fear. God is sovereign. You're being worldly. And both voices are calling you a bad Christian if you listen to the other one. So let me ask you the question nobody's asking. What if both voices are wrong? What if the Christians who survive what's coming aren't the ones who predicted it and aren't the ones who ignored it, but the ones who prepared their souls? Tonight, you're going to learn something that will completely change how you view world events, biblical prophecy, and what God is actually asking of you right now. Not speculation, not date setting, but truth that will anchor you when everything around you is shaking. This is going to challenge you. Stay with me. Here's the problem nobody's talking about. The church is divided. And I don't mean denominationally, I mean functionally. Right now, as missiles fly in nations' two sides, there are two camps of Christians, and both are convinced the other camp is going to be caught unprepared. Camp 1, the Watchers. They've got Ezekiel 38 memorized. They can tell you exactly which ancient nation corresponds to which modern country. They're tracking alliances, military movements, prophetic timelines. They stock food, they watch prophecy update channels, and when tensions escalate, they feel something that looks like vindication. See, we were right to watch. Camp 2, the Trusters. They quote Philippians 4:6, do not be anxious about anything. They say things like, Jesus said there would be wars and rumors of wars, so this is just normal. They're aggressively dismissive of anyone who seems too focused on prophecy. And when tensions escalate, they feel something that looks like superiority. See, we trust God, you're just fearful. And here's what's wild. Both camps are afraid of the exact same thing. They're terrified of being the Christian who got it wrong, who was asleep when they should have been watching, or who was panicking when they should have been trusting. But what if I told you there's a third way, a way that Jesus himself modeled, a way that the early church actually practiced when Rome was collapsing around them, a way that doesn't require you to choose between watching and trusting, because it does both. But first, I need to tell you what happened to my friend David. 3 days ago, David texted me. We went to seminary together. He's a youth pastor now. Good man, loves Jesus. And his message said this, I can't sleep. I keep reading Ezekiel 38. Persia is right there in verse 5. Iran is Persia. Israel is surrounded by enemies. The alliances are forming exactly like the prophecy describes. My wife thinks I'm obsessing. But what if this is it? What if I'm supposed to be preparing my family and I'm not? What if the rapture happens and my kids aren't ready because I've been teaching them not to worry instead of teaching them to watch? I stared at that text for 20 minutes, because the easy answer, the one every pastor gives, is wrong. And the hard answer, the true answer, it's more terrifying and more comforting than anything you've heard from a pulpit. I didn't respond right away, because I needed to make sure I wasn't giving him empty theology. I needed to give him truth that would hold when missiles actually fly. So let me give you what I eventually gave him. Starting with what the Bible actually says. Not what your favorite prophecy teacher says. Not what makes you feel better. But what the text in context, in Hebrew, in its ancient Near Eastern framework, actually reveals. Open your Bible to Ezekiel 38. Go ahead. I'll wait. Now read verse 5. I'm going to read it in English, but I want you to see it. Persia, Cush, and Put will be with them, all with shields and helmets. Persia, that's the Hebrew word Paris. And geographically, historically, linguistically, Persia corresponds to modern-day Iran. That's not controversial, that's just fact. So the question becomes, is Ezekiel describing something that already happened, something happening now, or something still future? And here's where it gets interesting, because faithful, Bible-believing scholars disagree. Some say it was fulfilled symbolically. Some say partially fulfilled historically and awaiting complete fulfillment. Some say it's entirely future. I'm not going to tell you which view is right. What I'm going to tell you is what we know for certain. And it's this. God told Ezekiel that a coalition of nations, including Persia, would come against Israel in the latter days, and that God himself would supernaturally intervene to destroy them. Now, what does latter days mean? In Hebrew prophetic literature, that phrase, acharit hayamim, can mean different things depending on context. Sometimes it means the end of the current age. Sometimes it means in the distant future from now. Sometimes it specifically refers to the Messianic age. So when we see tensions rising between Iran and Israel, when we see military alliances forming, when we see the geopolitical pieces moving into positions that mirror Ezekiel's description, what are we supposed to do with that? Here's what we're not supposed to do. Claim we know for certain this is Ezekiel 38, because we don't. History is littered with Christians who are absolutely convinced they were living in the final generation. They identified contemporary figures as the Antichrist. They set dates for Christ's return. And they were wrong. Not wrong about the Bible. Wrong about their interpretation of current events. But here's what we should do. Watch. With discernment. With humility. With readiness. Because, and here's the part that's going to mess you up. Jesus gave us a command that sounds contradictory until you understand what he actually meant. Stop. I need you to see this. Matthew 24:16. Jesus says, "You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed." Don't be alarmed by wars. Got it. But then Luke 21:36. Jesus says, "Be always on the watch and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen." Watch. Constantly for what's about to happen. So which is it? Don't worry about wars? Or watch for what's coming? Here's the answer that will reframe everything. You're watching the wrong thing. Everyone's watching the Middle East, tracking Iran, monitoring Israel, analyzing alliances. And Jesus says, stop. That's not what I told you to watch. Matthew 24:42. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. Watch for him, not for missiles, not for war, not for Ezekiel 38 to check off your prophecy bingo card. Watch for Jesus, because he's not coming from Iran. He's not coming from Jerusalem. He's not coming through a geopolitical crisis you predicted. He's coming from heaven. On a day and hour you don't know. And the question he's going to ask isn't, did you figure out the timeline? The question is, were you ready? And suddenly, the entire conversation shifts. So let's get brutally honest. Because I think the reason this question, should Christians be concerned about Middle East tensions, creates so much anxiety is because we're asking the wrong question. The real question isn't about Iran, it's about you. It's about whether you've built your faith on a foundation that can withstand what's coming. And what's coming isn't necessarily World War III. What's coming is testing. For every single believer, Peter says it in 1 Peter 4:17, for it is time for judgment to begin with God's household. Not judgment as in condemnation, judgment as in testing, refining, revealing what's actually in you when the comfortable veneer gets stripped away. You know what terrifies me? And I mean actually keeps me up at night? It's not Iran. It's not missiles. It's not Ezekiel 38. It's the American church. Because we've been so comfortable for so long that I genuinely don't know if we're ready for discomfort. We've had religious freedom, financial prosperity, cultural acceptance. We've built churches that look like entertainment venues. We've created a version of Christianity that requires almost nothing from us. And I look at church history, at what happened to Christians in Rome when the empire collapsed, at believers in China during the Cultural Revolution, at the church in Syria when ISIS rolled through, and I see a pattern. The Christians who survived weren't the ones who predicted what was coming. They were the ones who had already died to themselves before persecution demanded it. They'd already counted the cost, already decided that Jesus was worth everything, already practiced sacrifice when it was optional so they'd be ready when it became mandatory. And that's what Jesus means when he says, watch. He doesn't mean become a prophecy expert. He means prepare your soul. He means prepare your soul. He means live with one foot in eternity. He means hold everything in this world loosely, so when it's taken, you're not destroyed. Watching isn't about studying the news. It's about examining your heart. Let me show you what this looks like practically. Okay, stop the video. Right now. I'm serious. I want you to imagine something, and I want you to be honest with your first emotional reaction, not your theological answer. Your gut response. Imagine you wake up tomorrow and discover that war has broken out. Real war, not proxy conflicts or political tensions. Actual, escalating, spreading war. And within 72 hours, it becomes clear this is going to affect you personally. Gas prices quadruple. Food supply chains break. Power grids fail in some areas. Martial law is declared. And you're standing in your kitchen with your family, and someone says, "What do we do?" Now freeze that moment. What's your first emotion? Not what you think you should feel. What do you actually feel? If your first emotion is fear not, "Lord, what's your will?" but raw fear, that's not failure. That's honesty. And it reveals something important. You've been building your faith on stability, not on Christ. But if your first emotion is panic, not just fear, but the belief that God has lost control, that you're on your own, that everything you believed might not be true, that's a foundation problem. That's what Jesus calls building on sand. But if your first emotion is this strange combination fear of the circumstances but trust in the one who holds you through them, grief over suffering but confidence that God is sovereign, uncertainty about tomorrow, but certainty about eternity, that's what it means to watch. That's the third way. Okay, play the video again. So what do you actually do when the news breaks, when tensions rise, when your group chat explodes with "Is this Ezekiel 38 messages?" Here's your playbook. First, you name your fear. Don't spiritualize it. Don't pretend it's not there. Psalm 56:30 says, "When I am afraid, I put my trust in you, not if, when." Fear is not sin. It's human. What you do with fear determines whether it becomes sin or becomes worship. Second, you pray specific prayers. Not vague, "God be with everyone" prayers. Specific. 1 Timothy 2:1-2. I urge then, first of all, that petitions, prayers, intercession, and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives. Pray for leaders by name, for restraint, for wisdom, for peace, even leaders you despise, especially them. Third, you refuse the doom scroll. If you're checking news updates every 15 minutes, you're not staying informed. You're feeding anxiety. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world." The pattern of this world is obsessive consumption of fear-inducing content. Break the pattern. Set times to check news, twice a day maximum, then close the app. Fourth, you focus on your actual mission. Matthew 28:19, go and make disciples. That's your assignment. That hasn't changed. Whether Christ returns tomorrow or 1,000 years from now, you've been given work to do. Do it. Faithfully, without distraction. Fifth, you practice presence, not just with God, with people. Your kids see your anxiety. Your spouse feels your distraction. Your coworkers notice when you're mentally somewhere else. Colossians 3:2 says, "Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things." That doesn't mean ignore what's happening. It means your primary orientation is eternal, not temporal. Sixth, you remind yourself of what's actually true. Not what feels true. What is true? Write these down. God is sovereign over every nation, Daniel 4:35. Nothing can separate me from his love, Romans 8:38-39. My citizenship is in heaven, Philippians 30:20. To live is Christ, to die is gain, Philippians 1:21. Jesus has already won, Colossians 2:15. Read those daily, not as magic words, as truth that rewrites your internal narrative. And seventh, this is the one nobody talks about. You get your finances in order, not because you're stockpiling for the apocalypse, but because debt is bondage, and when crisis comes, you want to be free to obey God without financial chains limiting your options. Proverbs 22:7, the borrower is slave to the lender. This isn't prosperity gospel, this is wisdom. You know what's wild? The question we started with was, should Christians be concerned about rising Middle East tensions? And the answer is, you've been asking the wrong question the entire time. The right question isn't, should I be concerned about Iran? The right question is, am I more afraid of dying than I am of standing before Jesus and realizing I wasted my life? Because here's the truth. You're going to die. Maybe in war, maybe in a car accident next Tuesday, maybe peacefully in your sleep at 94. But you're going to die. Death is not the variable. Readiness is, and if the thought of missiles scares you more than the thought of wasted years, you're not afraid of the right thing. Remember David? The text I got 3 days ago? I finally responded this morning, and here's what I said. Brother, you're asking the wrong question. You're asking, should I prepare my family for war? The real question is, have I taught my kids how to die well? Because whether it's missiles or cancer or a car crash, they're going to face death. Yours, theirs, people they love. And the Christians who make it through what's coming, whatever what's coming is, aren't the ones who stockpiled food. They're the ones who stockpiled faith, who practiced sacrifice, who learned to say Jesus is enough when they still had everything, so when everything's taken, they'll still have him. He responded 2 minutes later. That just wrecked me. In a good way. And then he said something that I think is the whole point of this conversation. I've been so focused on not missing the signs that I've been missing Jesus. That's it. That's the whole thing. Should Christians be concerned about rising Middle East tensions? Here's my final answer. Be aware. Be prayerful. Be discerning. Watch not the news but your heart. But don't be afraid. Because fear is a liar. And fear wants you to believe that your safety depends on what happens in the Middle East. It doesn't. Your safety was purchased on a cross. Your future was secured by an empty tomb. Your eternity was settled before the foundation of the world, and no missile, no matter how fast, can change that. Psalm 46,001:3. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way, and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Read that again. Though the earth give way, though everything you know collapses, though the ground beneath your feet disappears, though chaos reigns, we will not fear, not because we're strong, but because God is our refuge. And verse 10, be still, and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. Be still. In the middle of the noise, in the middle of the fear, in the middle of the headlines and the group chats, and the prophecy debates, be still. And know not guess, not hope, but know with certainty that he is God, not you, not Iran, not Israel, not America, him. And he will be exalted. Whether you understand the timeline or not, whether you predicted it or not, whether you were watching the right things or the wrong things, he will be exalted. Your job isn't to figure out the geopolitical chess match. Your job is to know him, to trust him, to follow him faithfully in the time you've been given. Can I tell you what I'm actually afraid of? I'm not afraid of war. I'm not afraid of tribulation. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of wasting my life. I'm afraid of getting to the end, whether that's tomorrow or in 50 years, and realizing I spent my energy on things that didn't matter, that I knew all the prophecy timelines but didn't know Jesus, that I could identify Gog and Magog but couldn't recognize the voice of my shepherd, that I watched the signs but missed the Savior. And I think that's what Jesus is afraid of too. Not afraid like he's anxious, but grieved, deeply grieved. That we'll be so focused on when he's coming that we forget why he came. That we'll be so obsessed with the end times that we miss the entire point. He came to save us, to redeem us, to make us whole, to reconcile us to the Father, and to invite us into a relationship that's not about predicting the future, but about trusting the one who holds it. So here's what I want you to do tonight. Before you go to bed, before you check the news one more time, before you fall down the prophecy YouTube rabbit hole, I want you to get on your knees. And I want you to ask Jesus one question. Am I watching for you? Or am I watching for events? Because if I'm honest, I've been more excited about being right than about seeing your face. And then I want you to listen. Really listen. Because he's going to show you something. Something about your heart. About where you've been placing your hope. About what you've been building your identity on. And it might hurt, but it will set you free. Here's what you're going to do right now. Before you click away, before you move on to the next video, scroll down to the comments and answer one question. Don't overthink it. First answer that comes to mind. What am I more afraid of? Tomorrow's headlines or standing before Jesus unprepared? Just type it. One sentence. Because that answer will reveal what you actually believe about eternity. And it will show you where your faith needs reinforcing. And here's what I want you to know. If your honest answer is, I'm more afraid of the headlines, that's not failure, that's awareness. And awareness is the first step toward change. Don't shame yourself. Just confess it. Bring it to Jesus. And let him replace fear with trust. Now, if you want next week's video, and this one's going to be controversial, where I break down the one prophecy about Israel that almost every Christian gets wrong, the one that changes everything about how you read Matthew 24, the one your pastor won't touch because it threatens the entire end times paradigm most churches teach, hit subscribe, because we're going places the algorithm doesn't like. We're asking questions that make people uncomfortable, and we're choosing truth over popularity. But I need to know you're serious. I need to know you're not just consuming content but actually wrestling with this. So comment, subscribe, and then, most importantly, do the hard work of examining your own heart, because the Middle East might explode tomorrow, or it might stay tense for another 50 years. But either way, Jesus is coming. And the only question that matters is, will you be ready? Not because you predicted it, but because you spent your life preparing for it. One last thing. David texted me again tonight. Just 3 words, thank you, brother. And then a minute later, I'm reading to my kids from Revelation tonight. Chapter 21. The new heaven and new earth, because I realize they need to know where the story ends, not with war, with wedding, with God dwelling with his people, with every tear wiped away, with death destroyed forever. That's the headline that matters. He's right. The world ends with a wedding, with a city coming down from heaven, with God making all things new. That's what you're watching for, not war. Wedding, and he's coming for his bride. Are you ready? Subscribe, comment, and go prepare your soul. See you next week.